All right, I have a lot of slides. I get very excited about team-based learning, I have to say, so I do apologise in advance. So yes, I'm a lecturer in management and leadership at the University of Sussex Business School. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about team-based learning. This is really looking at what how we managed the lockdown in September 2020 and how we met the needs of Year 1 students living through the pandemic in a connected but incredibly isolated world. We tried to respond in a supportive way, and hopefully the presentation will show you what we did. So just to put in context, I convened a really large module in the business school in 2020, in September 2020, when we were in lockdown. We had 725 students enrolled on the module, which equated to 13 two-hour synchronous workshops, and we also had 2 30-minute pre-recorded workshops for students, and the students come from every part of the business school, lots of different degrees. Okay, we were really worried about students coming into the business school. I'm a parent, and I have, you know, I watched some of the classes that my students had. Some of them were good, some my children had, some of them were good, some of them were bad, and I was really concerned about, you know, the sorts of levels of education that students had received from their school and college during lockdown, and how they would cope in an online HE environment. So we sent out surveys to our prospective students, and these were the sorts of concerns that were raised, and we did expect that, but I had to then think really carefully about, you know, what was I going to do to create a module that not only met the educational needs, but also met the social aspects around loneliness and general well-being. So I had to think about, you know, which strategies I was going to use. So I had a particular dilemma, and the dilemma really focused on how was I going to encourage engagement, participation, inclusivity, critical thinking. How was I going to ensure a really good learning experience, and that there were feedback opportunities for students online. And if you think about, you know, Year 1 students before the pandemic, Year 1 students typically discuss or complain or talk about the fact that, you know, large classes are impersonal. There is this culture of anonymity, which students really struggle with, and within a pandemic, that's only going to exacerbate the situation. So I decided team-based learning and a business simulation would be a good fit. Team-based learning has been proven to work online before the pandemic, and I've worked on business simulations across the globe with peers online, so I know they work. So I figured actually this would be a really good way to manage the situation. But I had lots of other concerns: time zone differences with timetabling, for example, the available resources for staff and students, you know, making sure that staff and students had good you know, study areas. How do you do that? I mean, it's not just about students, it's about staff as well, and worries about increasing staff workload, because there will be staff who haven't taught using team-based learning, and there will be staff who certainly haven't used business simulations as well. So just adding to that pressure, I was really concerned about that. So why team-based learning? Well, I take a social constructivist approach to my teaching, and I believe that the relationship between the cognitive process and social interaction between peers and teachers are absolutely key, and team-based learning fits this really well. It's an excellent pedagogy to re-engage learners, and it will also reduce the isolation that students were reporting and various bodies were reporting through lockdown, and should allow them to develop friendship groups with any luck. That was the hope. It also offers continuous feedback from peers, you know, within the team itself, but also from the tutor, and it allows for communication, creativity, critical thinking and collaboration, the 4 C's, which I think are absolutely vital. And in terms of developing a team, if done carefully, it can actually develop very high performing independent teams, which will be useful throughout the students' educational career, but also it's a skill sought by employers as well. So our module looked like this. It was structured like this. In weeks 2 to 5, we had team-based learning activities where students developed knowledge. And that knowledge was then tested in an online MCQ test in week 6, and it was just 60 questions. And the aim was that by week 7, the team had developed and they would be able to tackle a really large application activity, in this case a business simulation, that accounted for 60% of their overall marks in total. You can see it was broken down into the presentation, the business rank, and the peer marks as well. What was important here was to stress to the group that all activities fed into each other, and that engagement and participation were really important to succeed in the module. We weren't asking students to do anything that they didn't have to do, because obviously there was a lot of pressure on students as it was being in the situation that they were. We also touched on sustainability in the module, so we offered the opportunity to take through the tests, the UN Sustainable Development Goals test, which all students did do. So the most important thing that we found, and the difference online, is with team-based learning, you need to build your teams carefully. Because we're in lockdown, we could only have groups of 6 in case, if students wanted to meet up with distance between them. But in actual fact, that is the ideal number for team-based learning anyway, 6 students. The most important aspect was that the business coach group the teams. We did not want teams self-selecting or trying to contact each other and saying, can I go with this person, can I go with that person online. That wasn't something that we wanted to do, and certainly in a face-to-face setting we don't do that either, because what we needed to ensure was that that teams were balanced, inclusive, and they were diverse. We wanted very balanced groups in all of those areas. And it was harder online. Normally in the classroom, I would line students up from one side of the room to the other side of the room, and I'd say, right, those of you who live in Brighton are on the right, those of you who originate furthest away from Brighton are on the left, and you have to organise yourselves. And I give out numbers, and then I group the teams, and then when they're seated, you can just make adjustments. It was far harder online, and we did have, all the members of staff did have to sit and look through our student lists and work out, who we thought would go together well. Normally it's a fair and equitable process, and we tried to stress that was the case, and students generally were happy. Teams did work on the whole. Where they didn't, we did intercept and change the odd member. Now, in terms of team-based learning itself, I assume everyone knows about team-based learning. It is an iterative learning process, and in weeks 2 to 5 the workshops began with students coming into the class and taking what we call an individual readiness test, which is based on the activities they have been asked to look at prior to coming to class. In this case, it was an MCQ in 10 questions, and individuals took the test, and when the test was finished, we put students into the breakout rooms, and then the team took the test, and they were allowed to discuss the answers and come up with the most appropriate answer to the question. And it's a really good way of developing knowledge and also reducing isolation. Once the team readiness test is finished, then students come back into the into Zoom, into the main class, and the lecturer discusses the answers and identifies areas where there are knowledge gaps, and may give a short mini lecture. And then at that point, the teams went back into their breakout rooms and worked on an application activity where they were applying the concepts to that particular section, of that week. Now, I know breakout rooms really were criticised through lockdown, and I was very, very worried about having breakout rooms used so heavily actually in the group, in the classes. But we received some really good feedback at the end of the course review, and I was very surprised to get that. And I've just put the feedback up onto the on the slides for you. The students actually enjoyed it. They enjoyed the team-based learning activities, and they enjoyed having the social interaction with other students. So that was reassuring. I was slightly happier at that point. Okay. But then we had to think about, the large application exercise. Once the team-based learning had finished in week 7, students moved into complete a business simulation. And there's been a lot of criticism around business simulations, saying that yes, students enjoy them, but actually they don't achieve any higher order learning, and that they're not actually that useful. But using Anderson and Lauder's alternative taxonomy, I disagree with the research, and other people do as well, that students can achieve these higher order skills. And for that reason, I decided that the business simulation was actually a very good option. It offers transformational real-world learning experience. It fits within the constructivist pedagogy, and it gives students some idea of a business in lieu of a placement. I mean, A, we're in lockdown, and B, you couldn't put 729 or 49 students into a placement. You just couldn't do that. Now, within the business simulation, the lecturer becomes the business coach, and what they did was they gave students time each week to ask questions. They supported students, and for that reason the pedagogy shifted from team-based to problem-based learning, and that is the subtle difference between the two. Under problem-based learning, the tutor is actively involved to support the teams to ensure that they will actually complete the situation. But generally it worked. So the class hierarchy reversed to some extent, and the students kind of ran their class. Does TBL fit, do business simulations fit with TBL? Yes, they do, because obviously we wanted it to be the large application exercise of a team-based learning situation. And using the 4S framework that we use to design application exercises for TBL, we could see that it fits. We had a significant and same problem. The business simulation ran for 4 weeks, 1 year equaled 1 year's trading. All the students did the same thing. And actually I used the marketplace fundamentals simulation for that. Teams set up the same business and they assigned key roles, and they had to run the business ethically on a global scale. Teams had specific choices. They had to use the topics that we covered within weeks 2 to 9, and there was a simultaneous report. So each week the business rank position were published, which actually made the simulation incredibly competitive between the whole cohort, and all of the teams had to give presentations in weeks 10 and 11. So it did fit very well with team-based learning generally. And the business presentation is an authentic assessment. So students appreciated it. It did work. What was its impact on grades? I was really concerned going into 2020 that we would have a lot of very low grades, possibly fails, but you can see the midterm grades, the midterm multiple choice grades, and the final module grades did not reflect that. We had very good outcomes in those years, and I've compared them with 2021-22 grades. So we were, it works, and it worked very well. But really what matters is, did it actually achieve what we wanted to achieve? Did it achieve deep learning? Did students achieve friends? Did they form cohesive teams? And we can see from the response from surveys we put out through MEQs and other surveys, that students did appreciate the approach, and it was successful. But what we wanted was actually student feedback, and I received quite a bit of feedback. It was just, there was so much, obviously, trawling through it took quite a while. But what I've done is put up some pertinent ones. I thought this was very, very nice, being able to actually meet students in a time when this is not possible. The most beneficial aspect, getting familiar with content at a deeper level. That was one of our targets, one of the elements we wanted to make sure we achieved. In terms of reducing anxiety, it made me realise everyone was in a similar situation. Again, a very important element that I wanted to achieve. It's a great opportunity for foreign speaking students. Again, really important aspect. Becoming independent and solving problems, an important aspect. And this one I really liked, more engaging than any other seminar. I was really happy to see that, obviously. Okay, whilst this was a really big ask, generally to rewrite a module, I had to think about the staff. My team are really important, and we supported staff, or I supported staff through weekly team meetings, refresher courses, introductory courses. I had new members on my team in 2020, September 2020, who'd never taught TBL, never used TBL, who'd never used a business simulation before. So there was a lot of background training that went on to support staff. We had business coaches double marking presentations. We had a lot of just general conversational times as well, where we could talk to each other about various aspects of the course, because ultimately the team is the most valuable resource, and they were really amazing. What I'd like to just leave you with of this whirlwind presentation is a point that I think encapsulates the whole experience on IBM through using TBL and the business situation. I really like this quote, and hopefully this is the case for my students. Okay, so I have a link on these slides, which I'm sure will be made available. They're very useful team-based learning links, some links about the simulations that are available. These are particularly good ones. And if any of you are thinking about peer evaluation, Teammates is quite a useful application to use. And if anyone wants to chat about team-based learning or business simulations, I've also put my email on the slide. Thank you very much.